Welcome to Accelerate OC, the only show focused on the people leading innovation in Orange County. Join our host, Kerry Ransom, in his conversations with the trendsetters, entrepreneurs, investors, and leaders here, because it's time to Accelerate OC.
Good morning. Welcome to Accelerate OC. I'm Kerry Ransom, and thanks always to our engineer, Paul, for making me and my guests sound so good. Today, our episode is sponsored by my friend Jeff Martin, who runs Collective Genius. And I particularly like having Jeff as a sponsor this time of year. We're in Q4, and a lot of the guests I have on here are CEOs, and they're thinking about the year ahead in 2020 and want to do some offsite leadership training planning with their team. And Jeff has a facilitated offsite planning program called Peak Planning, where he'll lead the offsite and help the CEO and team really develop a plan that they can execute on in the coming years. He's a great guy. If you're interested in learning more about peak planning, hit me up and I can introduce you to Jeff. I'm super excited to have my friend Kerry Breeze here today. And before we get into hearing about his journey, as he started as a software engineer, then became an insurance company executive, and then a tech startup CEO. And we'll talk also about his new venture, NowRX. But before we do that, let me talk to you a little bit about Kerry. He's currently the co-founder and CEO of NowRX, which is, at least I would describe it as a tech startup in the pharmacy experience industry. And they're using better logistics and better data and intelligence and analytics to save the whole industry cost, and then also focusing on patients or those of us who are getting prescriptions to improve our adherence to that. And they opened their first pharmacy a couple years ago in Northern California, yet they're led by a team here in Orange County, and they're about to open a new pharmacy here very shortly, and so I'll let him tell more about that. Prior to that, he was the CEO at another tech company here called GenieDB, which was going after a behemoth in Amazon Web Services in the database as a service space. And he was also, before that, an executive at several insurance companies, including a marine insurance company that he acquired outside of a larger financial services firm, the corporate orphan probably type of scenario. I don't know, we'll get into that today, but a great experience and something that I've had a little bit of experience with as well. And as I mentioned earlier, he began his career as a software engineer, actually at one of the big defense contractors, Lockheed Martin. Kerry and I met several years ago. We were both at that point in the middle of kind of navigating the respective startups that we were involved with, and had some time to spend together and kind of commiserate about some of the adventures and challenges that ensue. And I really enjoyed those conversations. Great to have him back in here today, and excited to really talk about what he's up to with NowRX. He's also been a community guy, and that's always near and dear to me, in that he is not just building a business, but he's also really involved in his community. He's been active with youth sports, something that I also have near and dear to my heart with my kids, and also mentoring other entrepreneurs. And I think that's something that any of us, as we're doing things, want to see where we can pay it forward and give back. So to me, he is the model and the type of innovator that we need more of here, making things happen in his business, but also really moving things forward in the community. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks so much, Cary. Great to see you again, and
Yes.
thanks for having me on your podcast here. It's exciting.
Awesome. Well, let's get to the starting line. I think you're the first person, in fact, I know you're the first person other than me, named Kerry, to be on the show. So
brothers from another mother.
That's right. So we have brothers in name. So introduce the audience to NowRX, how it got started, and where things are right now.
So NowRX is a complete rethink of the pharmacy model, right? You look at other industries that have been disrupted by technology. No one's standing in line at the bank anymore. Mm-hmm. No one's waiting for a taxi. And yet, all across America, people are spending hours waiting in line at pharmacies for relatively commodity-based products that are non-perishable. Mm-hmm. And so we've completely re-engineered that model based around a free same-day delivery. So customers don't have to go to a pharmacy. The experience is completely remote, hyper convenient, delivery right to home or office same day, free of charge. So you get the entire experience and product and service that you would get from a regular corner store pharmacy, but you don't have to leave your house. And we think and have firm conviction that that is where the pharmacy market is going to be in several years. We feel the consumers are going to drag the industry that way. But it's an interesting opportunity from an entrepreneur perspective. I'm sure you can sympathize. We believe that big players in the industry, CVS and Walgreens, they're motivated not to go to that kind of model, right? They want customers in their store. So that's why we think there's a disruptive opportunity here. We are using all the latest in technology. So we really kind of pulled apart every aspect of pharmacy. We're using automation. We're using robotics. We're using a lot of software. We're using logistics that you mentioned. So we have our own logistics platform, our own pharmacy management software. It's all integrated. We have our own delivery fleet and drivers and vehicles. And we operate out of a completely different business model, small, commercial, micro fulfillment centers based on a lot of automation, a lot of low cost, low fixed overhead, and then just a lot of software and convenience.
Very cool. So you opened, as I mentioned earlier, you opened your first center. I want to make sure I call it the right thing. I would call it a pharmacy, but
pharmacy is okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you opened your first one up in Northern California, as opposed to here, which in some respects I would consider inconvenient, given that you're here and most of the team is here. So I guess tell the audience, why did you do that, and what have you learned from that initial?
Yeah, it's a good question. My co-founder and I had worked on another company together down here in Orange County called GenieDB, as you mentioned. We wanted to do another startup. We looked into healthcare and thought this was a really good opportunity. As I said, some real disruptive potential. And we thought, just looking at the industry and the size of market that we're trying to go after, we felt the need for getting some big equity partners, some big deep pocket VCs. There's some venture capitalists in Orange County, but we thought, it's a more target-rich environment being in the Bay Area. We always had plans to bring the company down to Orange County after some time. We wanted to get the model, though, kind of proven. We think Silicon Valley is a good demographic for innovation, a lot of early adopters. So we thought it was a good community for the service itself to test.
Sure. And
we're local to a lot of VCs, just more VCs per square mile. And that really is what drove that decision ultimately.
Well, I think what we've seen with several entrepreneurs from here historically, as often they haven't started up in the Bay Area, but the lure of the capital has often pulled them up there. So it's interesting to see you trying to execute almost a counter measure by saying we'll go there first, but we have every intention to really build the company here.
Yeah, we tried to short circuit that rather than kind of getting a test pilot going somewhere else. We figured let's just go up to the valley, be right in the center of it all. And I think that was still a sound decision. We'd probably make the same decision if we're going to do it again. Although, as I'm sure we'll talk about, and some of the work you're doing, I think Orange County also has some pros and cons to it in terms of kind of launching a startup down here. So it's 6 one, half a dozen the other. But for us, it kind of fell down on the other side.
Yeah, that's great, and I'm happy, of course, as the host at Accelerate OC to firmly say this is going to be an Orange County company, and we're going to do as a community whatever we can do to help you in that respect. So you're in the middle of raising some capital for NowRX right now, and you're using a little bit of what I'd characterize as a non-traditional approach with equity crowdfunding. And this isn't the first time you guys have used it for NowRX. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing from how you're raising capital and really what's led you down that path.
Yeah, crowdfunding has come a long way since 5 or 6 years ago. particularly the equity crowdfunding, the so-called Reg A. We got exposed to it a couple years back and started to get interested in that possibility as an alternative way to raise some funding. And in my mind, it's an interesting hybrid between what traditionally would be a private company, which we're all used to and comfortable with how they operate, how they raise money, and public companies, which you're listing on a stock exchange, anyone can invest the stock. The Reg A equity crowdfunding is an interesting hybrid in between, where you're like a private company, but you can sell stock to just about anybody, as long as you follow certain protocols and are on a accredited, approved website and platform. And so we thought it was an interesting idea. We raised $1 million back in 2017. It went really well. We found that our concept of NowRX really resonated with people. They got the idea right away.
Anyone who's waited in line for 2 hours at a pharmacy is probably interested in what you're doing.
We got such an enthusiastic response because of that we decided to give it another shot for our Series A. And we were talking to VCs. We had some term sheets, and we thought we'd try the crowd again. One of the advantages I see, although there's definitely pros and cons, but one of the pros I see with the crowdfunding is you're generally going to get a little bit more entrepreneur favorable terms. There's no gotcha clauses. Valuations are fair, I think, and reasonable. You're not giving up a board seat, right? So you can maintain control of the company. You're also out there promoting your brand. And for a consumer-based service like ours, we thought that had some benefits too. So we raised $7 million for our Series A, all crowdfunded.
Amazing.
Again, really enthusiastic response. Lots of great feedback, lots of people saying, hey, when you come into our area, we love the service, we believe in the company. And so now we've got thousands of cheerleaders for NowRX spread out across the country, and we think over time that's going to accelerate our growth. So we're going out again, doing a Series B right now. It's we've selected seedinvest.com as the platform. We launched about 2.5 weeks ago. We're already $1.3 million in raised money, and it's starting to accelerate from there.
That's great. Now, how much in total are you planning to raise for this round?
So for the entire round, we're raising $20 million. We suspect some of that will come from traditional institutional investors and some from the crowd. We'll see how that goes. It's as you know, crowdfunding is a process. It's usually a 4 to 5, a 6 month process. So we'll see how that goes. So the pre-money valuation is $65 million. We're going to do about $8 million in revenue this year, which is up about 70% over last year. So we're on a good growth trajectory. We're opening up in Orange County, and we think we're starting to hit an inflection point. So 20 million Series B is to really accelerate that forward, go into the rest of the West Coast with our service, reinvest in our technology, some of our automation technology, push that further, and also ramp up some of our direct-to-consumer advertising.
That's great. Let's go under the hood a little bit more. I've got a couple more questions. So this first one may be a little bit controversial. If you do end up having a Series B that is partially crowdfunded and partially institutionally led, do you anticipate that all those investors will have the same terms?
Good question. Don't know at this point. A little too early to say. There is a possibility of doing a side-by-side round where we would have a crowdfunding round, and we would set up a separate series, a B1, call it, with different terms. It's something we're considering. For the right partner, we could certainly do that, and I think that would make sense to all investors. Obviously, we want to keep everyone on as much pari passu as we can.
Sure.
So we'll play that by ear, but it's a good question. It's interesting. This is a new realm.
Yes.
And as these bigger and bigger equity crowdfunding rounds become more commonplace, I think you'll start to see a lot of different varieties of what you're describing. Part VC, part institutional, part strategic, part crowdfunding. So I think it's a little bit too early to tell how all of that shakes out.
It's a fascinating scenario, and I'm anticipating the next question I'm going to ask is, do you believe that this Series B will be your last, or do you anticipate in a business like yours that you're going to need additional capital down the road?
We're definitely targeting more capital raises after this. In fact, I think the raises will get larger. The next move for us, this round, the B round that we're talking about, will get us to the West Coast. But to go national, we do anticipate a large round, most likely institutional. Could be as high as $100 million to take the company nationwide. Again, we think the market size is so massive. This is a $400 billion industry. There's no being successful at a small level in pharmacy. It's go big or go home.
Yes.
So
yeah, totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And part of why I teed up that question is I was just literally earlier this morning having this conversation that the venture pathway is a somewhat fascinating and I think many will argue still somewhat broken one, in that the next round is really generally going to dictate the terms. And if the prior round dictated really unfavorable terms, that could prevent you from that future round. And so you have to always navigate that appropriately. And I don't know that there's often enough conversation out there about that. But as I think about equity crowdfunding, often those aren't the folks that really are going to deeply understand that. So that obligation probably falls on you and your advisors and counsel to make sure you're fairly treating them, but also not hurting your chances of seeing what you already see in your future, because that I anticipated you were going to say you're probably going to need significantly more, because there is a lot to what you're talking about in your business with logistics and robotics and a fleet, and that has some capital intensity to it versus other types of businesses for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. I think you're touching on a lot of important concepts. I would say that the equity crowdfunding has come a long way. So, for example, we're on this platform called Seed Invest.
Yes.
And Seed Invest, I like their business model. They're a licensed broker-dealer. But they very clearly have a mission statement where they are putting themselves on the side of the investors. And so they do a lot of due diligence. They bring in third-party companies to do additional due diligence. And there's quite a bit of negotiation with their investment committee, with the Seed Invest investment committee, about terms of the round, investor rights. And actually, for this round in particular, we worked very hard making the round more conforming to what a VC type deal might look like. Still in a very fair way. Hopefully, you alluded to how the model's sometimes broken on the VC side. So it's a very clean deal, but it is somewhat conforming in terms of investor rights and things like that. And the communication about future money raises and things has also we've been very transparent about that as well. Both in partnership with Seed Invest and just direct with our investors. So, I do think we talked about this a little bit before we went on air. I think we're right now about maybe where equity crowdfunding is about 5 years old. I suspect in another 5 years, I think it's going to be commonplace. I think it'll become more standard, just another alternative way to raise money. Some rounds for companies will be crowdfunded. Later rounds will be VC. I think now we're in that transition stage where not everyone's exactly sure how it all shakes out. And some institutional investors are lining up on one side, some are on the other side. Some of the unaccredited investors are similarly aligned. They're not sure what to make of it.
Sure.
But for one thing, it's for sure, you now have an incredible opportunity for unaccredited investors to get into deals that historically were only available to VCs. So I think that's the overriding theme that I think is a real positive.
I totally agree with that. And I think the place where it's particularly compelling is in a business like yours that has a consumer story that they can understand. My last startup, we looked very seriously at equity crowdfunding, partly because it was a consumer mobile bank, and everybody understands, just like you were saying earlier, people are not waiting in line at the bank anymore if they can help it. And we felt like giving them access to own a part of the bank that many of them were using as their primary depository institution was a compelling option to consider.
Right. I get asked a lot. I get approached a lot by a lot of entrepreneurs and even VC firms and other, seed investor type funds about, is crowdfunding right for their particular
Sure.
company. And I do tend to advise that, if you have an idea that really resonates with people, you can explain it quickly. There's an aha
That's right.
moment within 10 seconds.
Yes.
That's a good fit for
That's right.
crowdfunding. If you're, doing some AI infused, neurobiology, startup, it may not play that well in the crowd.
Yep.
But then you probably will have more to say to a VC about defensibility and things like that. And so it, may point you better in the VC direction. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And certainly this will be a really neat story to follow, as I think once again illustrating that we have folks in Orange County who are leading the way in so many different areas and so many different industries, and even just embracing something like an equity crowdfunding model, which, to your point, there are some people that have done this, but it still is largely unknown and unclear to the masses as to where these will shake out. But certainly, as I said, with a business like yours, I think this totally makes sense, and it's been exciting to see you guys have success like you have.
Thank you.
So, Cary, why choose the pharmacy business? I mean, you've done a lot of things. I talked about your history, and equivalently, I have done a lot of things and been in a lot of industries as well. I'm sure after GenieDB, you looked at a lot of different opportunities. What was it that led you to, this is the thing we need to go, or I need to go do?
Yeah, my co-founder and I were convinced of two things. We really wanted to do a startup together again because we just worked so well together.
Mm-hmm. And that's critical, that chemistry as a team.
Yeah, it really is, as you know. And we dovetail really well. I've got a bit of a hybrid background, as you've alluded to.
Mm-hmm.
I've got some technical background and some business, and my co-founder is technical with some business as well. So we really talk and merge and complement each other. So we were convinced to do another startup together, and we both were convinced that healthcare is the way to go. We wanted to try to impact the community in a positive way. It seems like there are a lot of antiquated and bottlenecked processes and things in healthcare. No VCs have really had a lot of success disrupting the market, and it just stuck in our craw. And really, I was just we were in a whiteboard. We were in a room whiteboarding for a couple of weeks and going through a bunch of different ideas. And I just happened to go to the doctor during that kind of inventive time. So I had all these ideas flowing through my head as I'm driving around, and I went to the doctor. I got a paper prescription for pain medication in my knee.
Yeah.
I drive that piece of paper across town to my local CVS, where I proceeded to stay in 3 lines, one just to hand off the piece of paper. Then I sat down again, waited another 10 minutes, got up, paid, then sat down again, got up again, got my medication, and stood in line for the pharmacist. So I called my co-founder, Sumit. I said, this is just madness. How come no one has fixed this yet?
Yes.
These are non-perishable items. We can communicate via phone now, and I can get a pharmacist consultation via video chat. Everything's going delivery. Why is this still a thing? And he said, I cannot believe you're telling me about pharmacy right now. This is while I was standing in line at CVS, or like walking out. He said, my wife just walked through the door complaining about her experience at the local pharmacy.
Wow.
And she's never mentioned pharmacy to me before either. And we just hashed out the business plan in, 5 minutes on the phone. And then the first thing I did was, try to shoot it down, right? So I went through my network really quickly on LinkedIn. Who knows anything about pharmacy? I certainly don't. And we sketched out a business plan, and we ran it by as many people as we could find. And the more people we spoke to that were experts in the industry, the more encouragement we got.
That's great.
And everyone just said, there's no reason this can't work. Yeah, there's a lot of regulatory hurdles. You have to do a bunch of things to get around that and build some technology to really make the margins work. But we see no reason why this wouldn't work. And that just got us more and more excited. And honestly, within Within 30 days, my co-founder had moved up to the Bay Area. We'd raised about $1 million from friends and family, and we were standing in a warehouse, the two of us in Mountain View, getting ready to start a pharmacy.
Amazing. Great founding story, and glad to have it on the record here to share with the community. I think there's just so much to be learned from that, particularly hey, we have an idea, but let's go share it with others before we really put all the time in. I find that far too often somebody keeps it to themselves and won't go really validate or invalidate it to that level. So
that's a good point, Cary. The people talk about, hey, if there's a few competitors, it's actually a good thing.
Yes.
But a lot of entrepreneurs really have a hard time with that one.
That's
I myself had a hard time with that one. We did see a few competitors that were out there that
Sure.
had thought of a similar idea. But it is true. Like that is good validation. You should listen to that.
Absolutely.
You want to have a few other competitors out there trying to validate the same thing. If you're the only one and you're keeping it to yourself and you're not running this by anyone, you want to really think carefully about that.
That's right. Yeah, I think that is so poignant in that even when I meet entrepreneurs and I ask them about competitive landscape and they say we don't have competition, I either get really concerned about the opportunity itself, or I get concerned about them as the entrepreneur,
Or both.
that there's something because I feel like in almost all cases there's an alternative or there's a competitor.
Pretty rare situation that you're the only human in the world to think of that idea.
That's right. So you're building it here in Orange County. I've got you on here to be able to really talk to our community. What do you need, and where can the Orange County community be helpful to NowRX and you and the team at this point?
Well, I'm really encouraged by Orange County. It's got so much potential. I mean, I'm preaching to the converted, obviously, but everything you're doing to build awareness of startups in the community is so valuable. We're trying to build a national brand. We're doing it by territory. We have to. We're limited in resources. We can't be in 50 cities overnight. And so, I think two things, building awareness that there's a new service and a new model, and they're, trying to reach out to those early adopters that are out there in Orange County, is, an interesting thing. And how do you go about doing that? And, so that's one thing that I'm starting to think about. And I brought in a mutual acquaintance of ours, Mike Rosenberg, who's really starting to work with some talented people and coming up with some ideas around kind of creating that virality, that guerrilla marketing, getting that word of mouth going that, hey, there's a new way to go to your pharmacy. It's not like it used to be for the last 30 years. So that's one area. And then the other area, I think I'd just love to see more investment and investors and venture capitalists, continue to support Orange County startup companies. I think there's so much more potential here with all the wealth and innovation centers and universities that I'd love to see just a community, not just for my company, but for all startups in Orange County. Like we really could use a more cohesive, organized, venture community. And I don't really see a reason why it hasn't really taken off. I mean, there's some movement in certainly, Silicon Beach, as they say.
Yes.
But down here in Orange County proper, Irvine's a great financial center. You'd expect to see more. So I'm not sure how to affect that, but that's one of my wishes.
Well, one of them is to be here. I think we've got a good story. We've got a good, mature and proven team that's come together to really build a company of substance here, and we should be taking that to the people here and really make this, in many respects, I'll call it an Orange County party round. Let's get some of the folks who are here involved, and I think that's where it starts. Is we think about the idea of coming together around it.
Yeah, and I think that's a great combination. You can make an investment in the company, you can experience a service, you can those two factors together make a very powerful community involvement, and we'd love to see that.
That's great. Well, Cary, Paul has now given me the sign a few times here. I'd love to continue this conversation, and we certainly will. And I think, as a community here, we want to follow along with the NowRX story. But to wrap up for today, one of the things I always like to finish with, and you've been a part of a lot of different companies and have a lot of experience in your career. What's the one thing you'd love to share with our audience, other entrepreneurs that are trying to start or build their companies here in Orange County? What's the one thing you'd like to leave them with that's been a lesson or key point of wisdom you have to share?
Well, one thing I always try to focus on, and I do advise early entrepreneurs in this manner, I think it's important to really focus on the business model, whatever idea you're chasing. I tend to see people focus on the tech and think if they build it, people will come, especially in healthcare. I've seen a lot of that. And healthcare has got some complexity. There's different payers.
Especially in the business model.
Yeah, there's providers, there's payers. It's almost never the consumer that's paying. So, right. So trying to narrow focus on that business model. Who's going to pay you? How are they going to pay you? How are you going to get to them? How are they going to react? How do you make that profitable? All of that, I think, doesn't get enough focus. And I think it'll put you in good stead as an entrepreneur if you've really put the time in on the business model.
That's great. Well, Cary, thank you so much for joining me here today on Accelerate OC, for sharing your experience and wisdom and introducing us to NowRX. And it's really exciting that you're building such an innovative company here in Orange County. Certainly wish you and the team all the best, and consider the Accelerate OC family a resource to all of you as you continue forward. You're definitely doing your part to Accelerate OC. Welcome to the family.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
You've just listened to Accelerate OC. Join our live recordings every Tuesday morning at accelerateoc.com, or listen, like, and share anytime from your favorite podcast spot. Let's Accelerate OC together.